Well, thank you for coming to see us. Can I give you a big welcome to everyone to the Buddhist Society. This is our 100th year, so it's a special year, and this is the first talk of our 100th anniversary. And our speaker tonight is Khentrul Rinpoche. He's born in Tibet in 1965 during the Cultural Revolution. And I'm sure most of you here know the awful things that happened to the Tibetan population during that period. And it's not a good thing to start the talk with, really, but it was pretty dire. But I understand that during the time he was in Tibet, Khentrul Rinpoche was able to, despite all the difficulties, receive a proper traditional Tibetan training, which is very important, and under some of the great old masters, that generation of people who were brought up in Tibet. And during the process of that, obtained three sort of higher degrees, equivalent to sort of PhDs in different aspects of the Dharma, founded a monastery, or head of a monastery there, and now has, since leaving Tibet in 2002, has got teaching centers and meditation groups all over America and Europe and even in China. So it's a tremendous privilege for us to have you here tonight. And I think, I can't think of anyone better to be talking about the subject matter, which is finding joy in difficult times, in hard times. So, I'm delighted that you're with us, and thank you so much.
Yeah.
Tomba tuji janla shangsar lo shudu jarwa kunji hiko wadan zopo sangi pamaki jakhori yibjin noro sorwan dev taki tongkun rupar shingi lo oya ta terang teni lorgyu tang dambi teni tsokang di nang to 대 나초 대람 찬근 샤트테 샤피 고르캅 카르송아레 데니 텔란디나라 다니 촉조 코랑당 대 두지 치지와당 대진도 넬라요피 대람딤 찬락 베틀라 용요바 차차마라 데니
So tonight, Rinpoche said, I'm absolutely delighted to be here with all of you in this Buddhist society, which has such a rich and long history, and to be speaking with you this evening. And so I just want to begin by... And especially then that you're celebrating your 100th year, and I happen to be teaching in the very beginning of that, so that makes me very happy. And I'm just delighted to have this opportunity, and so thank you for having us, and thank you to the Buddhist Society, and all of you for coming and joining for these teachings this evening. Maso.
Hoy ta tendiri teni tanga cho tani toni khsabje sart kharni lok sarvi nalare teni tanga cho shirtang ko dipi lorgyu ma pochin ro charore ta lok sarba di nangla nga cho teni ta sarvachik gopchugre shawa kare dubkona lika kare dubkona tap shawachik gopchugre divshernanga cho lok sarwala kyang cho samru drakhi delgjuk.
And I also wish to offer New Year's greetings, because we've just entered into the year of 2024, and it's a beginning of a new year, and a new year for new activity and new projects and an opportunity for new beginnings. And so I offer the Tibetan greeting, Tashi Dele, for the new year of 2024. So we also have that to celebrate.
대니 다 계란수 하고 봐 나오신데 이 대랑 그 창그 회트 그 거대 가르리에 나는 다 둥암비 깝텔라 겐감바마 보지 대니 용회요래 대티 깝라 가르시 고크도 생아수 다 예후데 대와직 잘거나 간디시닝아수 대와직 잘터거도 둥암바 느리그 깝라 어디 거대샤야레스.
And so the topic of the discussion for this evening is about the modern times in which we find ourselves, in which there are many challenging circumstances and adverse conditions which we face. And so then how, in the midst of so much adversity and challenges, do we continue to strive for and to cultivate happiness and well-being? And so that's something in particular that we want to take into consideration. So.
대니 당봉이 나주 다둥암이 깝제나 가딘다고 질러제키오레 제나네 다 당상거 드니 두데 남바 샤탕치기오레 닝마나도이 두제텔라 둥암바 지피톤테 두 닝마제테 가레레제나 대니 나주 뉴몽비 닝마 대니 두지 닝마 대빈도 체이 닝마 대 뉴몽비 닝마 라속비 닝마마 보지 드니 송어레 대 눈이 당상 드니 가서 다들 닝미 남진지 카르케요레 두 남바제티 깝텔라 캬나주 하고 나비 고아 나비인데 시르노 근직든 랍삼로 타나 사체 메론 종아비제테 종진 tukchape matpi 종비제 그 와체땅 드니 tukcha망보 tukcha 토포 할리바레 대빈도 남주 그 샘친 남랍삼로 타나야 당상아주 가닌다고 레제나네 대니 못함시는 유모바마 보레 대빈도 다 찍라는 타그랑으로 놓아마도 뭐딱 녀로 놓고 매비두갑 언들이 찍라더니 착해요래 대빈도 망축망보 용후요 바당 다 나차망보 용후요 바당 나나바 나촉바요래 대빈도 강사가 레리영 뉴모바 할리비 마보 락바 놈보 어들이 그 뉴모바 하장 마보지 개빈비갑 언들이 그 둘갑 찍라 레보레스 디 망랑아주 둥암바 지피톤테 데고고레제레 마톤 텔리잠비 둥암바 지피 낙보 라쳔보전 믹쳔보전 직 lokhajiyo mares.
So when we talk about troubled times, we can say a degenerate age. In the Buddhist tradition, we talk about the degenerate age in the sutras, where there are 5 forms of degeneration. And so, for example, degeneration of mental afflictions is where we have more disturbing emotions, where they are growing or increasing in number and scope. And where we have a deterioration of the elements, more natural disasters, or a shortening of our lifespan, and so forth. And so we have various circumstances that are degenerate in that they're challenging, and that we are facing many challenges. And so we could call that, in more sort of colloquial terms, troubled times, or we could call that a degenerate age. And essentially, it is simply what many of us are already observing in our daily lives, that we can see that there's many challenges that we're facing in our modern times. For example, in the outer universe, we can see that there's a greater increase in natural disasters and of the elements of water, earth, fire, and so forth, and that there's a lot of disturbance and imbalance on the planet, and difficulties that we face on the planet in which we live, And then the contents of this planet, us as sentient beings, as human beings, then we find ourselves in a time where we have many more kind of obvious surface level disturbing and afflictive thoughts and emotions. And then how that affects us is, for example, it's a time where we have greater disconnection and distance between one another, not greater connection and closeness with one another. And then furthermore, of course, we can see obvious circumstances of challenges such as war and dispute, such as a rampant level of sicknesses, disease and illness. And individually, internally, our kind of level of affliction, our sensitivity, the ways in which we easily become disturbed and easily become upset and so forth are growing. And so we do face so many challenges in our day-to-day lives, in our kind of whole sort of scope of our lives. And so it is fair to call then what we're facing now on earth troubled times. And that troubled times is not anything other than exactly what we're already experiencing. It's not like some other monster out there with horns that's something else. It's simply the challenges that we're facing as human beings on earth today. So.
대니 땅 아주 가르레스나 단들다우 둥은 그 깝라네 땅 아주 대화 집살거나 가립시 고근도 사매직 간입사고 그래 사면라고 지기 때리러와 딥셔나네 가르레스나 실당 그 대화 땅 둥을 제때 당은 담념 제때 초락섬 오래 대다우 초락 대화 둥을 담념 섬마 도망아 저 초락 제지 잠파 까게요 말에 디 초락 섬 대화 제때 코랑 대화 땅 둥을 담념 섬그 초르낭 대야 유르 템르라 테니 용고요래 유르치글라 테니 르규킨 템르치글라 테니 용고요래 대 마테나 용해요 말 딥셔나 가수 khoena gyurkin temre yit omba chigla thuk thana ngacho dewa yong khore gyurkin temre yit to yut mo pala chigla thukna ngacho semna la mam dewa yong khore yut om moyong kaya maim bala teni tamnyum chipeti chorbak sam ngacho gella yong khore di nani chorbak sam ti nani ngacho karere senana ta dungarte semshin sem sarjong rikpi sim zayate yut sarni zonte sakchik dungar la gam kantang te yomar thamche dungarli tardo kulo yore devate thomdo kulo yong kan tanga cho semshin thamche de chamnyam rese dewan dong khanim ba suyin na dorna tela matang mamaim pi semshin mrik ndaman na chok pa kare yena khapar kayam me pa 탐치 대화 톰도 굴로젠데스
So despite this, still when we look at the circumstances, we're in the pursuit, we could say, of happiness, of well-being and so forth. And so where do we find that? Where do we seek that out? And in general, when we talk about happiness, and this term in Tibetan means pleasure, joy, well-being, whatever you want to call it, all of that is called happiness. So it's like pleasant sensations. And then when we have suffering, that's unpleasant sensations. And then we have neither pleasant or unpleasant, and we have neutral sensations. And so our entire experience is either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And we all have these sensations, and they cover the full scope of everything that we experience. And so when these sensations arise, those of pleasure, typically we call happiness, of those unpleasant ones, suffering, and those ones that are neither pleasant nor unpleasant, neutral, then they arise in relation to the objects of our perception. And so due to the interdependence, the dependency of causes and conditions in dependence upon and in relation to the objects that we perceive, then we have these different sensations. So when the causes and conditions then that we're relating to, we perceive as being pleasing, we like it, then we have a pleasant sensation or happiness. When those causes and conditions are such that in relation to them, we see them as displeasing, we dislike them, then we have unpleasant sensations or suffering. And when those causes and conditions we're relating to are neither pleasant nor unpleasant, then we have neutral sensations. And pretty much that covers the full scope of our experience. Who is experiencing these three sensations? All sentient beings. Sentient means all beings who have mind, everyone who is conscious. Because when we have mind, mind is defined as being conscious and aware. And so then, because we're conscious, because we have mind, then we have pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral sensations. And nobody enjoys unpleasant sensations. Nobody wants to feel pain or unpleasant sensations. We don't like suffering. We want to be free from it. And then everybody enjoys positive sensations. We want to feel good, which is essentially to say that we're all in the pursuit of happiness. And so all sentient beings, everyone who has mind, whether human or otherwise, no matter where we come from or what we do, the full range of all living experience in being conscious and aware and having mind, we have these three sensations, and therefore we're all in the pursuit of happiness.
대니 당아추 오나 데타우 데와데 가니 토부 그래세나 다소 저와 전부 데레 다 데와데 가니 용표레 제나네 나초 데암 종임 종니데 유르라테니 직종표레 zuгда теро ракшала сок патан ачум 코리육 단 잠부랑 필로콜라 테니 데니 gelongshotang tok gorsatang hwamjurtang chanyantak klaso palap teni tichi semna ke ponda uchi yongkyore teni yang teni devin jongni chi yurla teni kyang yongkyore teni tarchi kani yongkyore senane ngachu yurchen sem ke toni yongkyore loi toni zo yongkyore koram jongni ter tauchi ke ngachu jongni nire di nani 답시 유르라텐 바테 시르탕아추 ngama tang아추 로타 똥탁 첨탁 마보치 고니 삼로 타나 타티와토 야르기 콤페르 마보치 로차리 머남기 히럽당 히윤당 데니 존테 테크놀로지 당 테초차 청마데 콤페르 침보 소니 타티와토 ngacho야 용니 다 차니크 할리피 제모레 봉완다고 징아초들이 야르기 송어레 대닌 코리육 탐체 대응 나초 하장 가첨보레 화나가 준직된 감 나초 니사 그 삽쇼 대응 나초 쫑좁식 거야 지레 나초 니사레 니사라양 내와 요레 나초 대니 대와직 숑거나 코리육 역보식 쫑좁제야 땅 공패 땅와 땅 대라가 노파음시 발라서 파차창 내와 요레 아 때더니 유르고 왕 삼로 땅나 대니 다 삼로 드리시 땅고레스
So if we think about then happiness or well-being, how do we achieve that? And in looking at and exploring that, then the question is, where does that come from? Where is the source of well-being or happiness? There are kind of two sources from which we derive well-being or happiness. And the first of these is external objects, forms, sounds, tastes, sense, tactile sensations. We get that from our outer circumstances, our wealth, a possession, status, fame, power, and so forth. And so there's then whatever degree of sort of well-being, of pleasure or happiness we can get from those external objects. And so we call that one source of happiness, a source of pleasure. Then the second source of happiness is from the mind itself, from the perceiver of the objects, the one that perceives and experiences them. And these are basically the only places that we can identify for a source of happiness, the outer objects or the perceiver of those objects. So when we look at the first of these outer objects, we can see that as human beings, our entire history has been one of developing those outer objects, of trying to improve our external circumstances, trying to develop the outer universe in all the ways that we have, to develop our knowledge, to develop our circumstances, and all of that kind of human history is a history of how we've developed the outer world all the way up to our modern technology and the continued ways in which we seek happiness in outer development and growing or expanding our external circumstances. But this also, and so we've kind of reached a place where, at least in terms of our basic physical needs met, we've reached the kind of pinnacle of what that can bring from the external circumstances. But that also includes, when we look at finding happiness in our external objects and environment, it includes this earth that we live on, the environment that we're in. And then we also need to protect that, because when that's a clean and comfortable place, then if we improve upon it, it improves our general human experience. If we destroy it or harm it and so forth, then also that decreases our well-being as humans in experiencing and living in this environment. But essentially, even that, when we talk about the development of that, all of that is encompassed within the outer objects that we rely on as a source for our happiness. Also?
Teri, teni ta tertavores, teni ta tili jambate, ni semkanani yongre, said teri girkin. Ta ona tertavu semnani devachi, ta ona tertavu semkanan girkin tang shi yurlatin bi girkin nikalatin Dewa yonghiona, dewa nyongkan kare yorizena, sum yongrizena, semtan luini kaken yongriz. Dertatu samlotana dikyore, semtan luini kaken yongriz. Yurki dewa zeti, zowo karezena, yurki gürken la tenni, dewa chongzam nyong chik yonghyore. Ta nguni dewam sanyipa mare. Shirol gu yurki toni yongyu dewate. Nga tsu te nguni deware samkyore, ma chatsami. Shiro yurko toni dewa yore samni nga tsu takchikdo yurko ni tolan batsun tang zolu mangpobshe, lirka mangpobshe ke yore. Kiang tsu hako hore nga tsun zambo lang katsip trila chembore. Tani nga tsu longchik yore. Tani choma mingmet dewi chetur yuk, sambor kangmet dewi chetur yuk, Dorna jiktan tamja wangrani chigli chingyok devyshokso yuk zayachik yore. De namshim shini matamambe samshin tamshib devyshokso yuk yore. Yino yuk santa ka yuk yore zowob zasate yurka topza yore. Yurka kare yongre zenana lu tang semyiki nangka zowo semla derkit nyonyong chik yong yore. Mare lu la, zowo lu comfortable tang, lu la dewa nyongso ngok yore. Kērāng sū sāmlō tāng tā ngā sū kāmbā tāng, mōtā tāng, tēnī nyāl sā tāng, kālā tāng, zūg dā, chē, rō, rakshā, kārē yin kiāng, tsō lū rēn dō gā. Tī tōn lā kāli gyāb kio rē sī, wā dī rē. Tsō lū rē sī, lū kio dewa, tēlā tēnī sēm kī nyōnyōng rē, nyōng kio rē, tēlā tēnī nyōnyōng mā tōng, nyōng kio mā rē sī.
So then the other source that we can identify for happiness is the mind, the perceiver and experiencer. And then this is also a source of well-being or happiness. So essentially we have external objects which can serve as conditions for happiness. And we have the internal mind which serves as a condition for happiness. So then when we think about, well, who experiences the happiness or pleasure, well-being, and so forth, the mind and body experience the pleasant sensations, which is what we're calling happiness. And so then when we look at what degree of happiness do we get from the outer universe, the objects of perception, versus the perceiver of the objects of perception, what degree of happiness do we get from the objects of perception? As we can see, as we rely on these external objects all the time, then we get little moments of pleasure, of kind of happiness or well-being or joy, moments here and there, but it's not actual, true happiness. And so we have to look at what can these external objects actually give us? What do we get from them? Because the majority of our time is reliant upon them. If we look at the majority of human beings, the vast majority of us, we place all of the emphasis of our getting of happiness on the external circumstances. We almost categorically, completely depend on our external circumstances for our happiness. And so almost 100% of our effort is into developing the outer world, to getting this object or that, and so forth. And so we know this because as we observe humans, how many actions are we as human beings, each and every one of us, engaging in every day? If you look at the world, how busy are we? And all of this is trying to get happiness from our external circumstances, trying to get whatever we possibly can from them. And so there's a saying, it says, even the eyeless ants move towards happiness. Even the legless worms move towards happiness. In brief, as if the entire world were in a great competition, everyone is constantly moving toward happiness, which is to say that all of our actions and all the things we do in our outer world to change and manipulate and develop it and acquire it and so forth is for the purpose of happiness, to feel good, to get pleasant sensations. And that's the case for humans and for all other living beings. And so when we look at then what are we pursuing in all of our actions, then we're pursuing happiness. And we're doing so by relying on the external objects and the circumstances in our lives. So then when we consider, well, what kind of happiness, pleasure, or well-being do we get from external objects, then they give us the experiencer of happiness, if you remember, is the mind and the body. Those are what experience pleasant sensations. But the external objects, primarily, they give us physical comfort, physical well-being. So if we think about all of our external objects, our houses, our cars, our beds, our food, our clothes, forms, sounds, tastes, sense, tactile sensations, all the things that we're constantly pursuing to experience kind of well-being primarily are on a physical level. Our body is what sort of enjoys the sensations, pleasant sensations that it derives from the outer material universe and objects. And what a level of happiness they're able to give our mind is very small, is very limited indeed. Naso?
Teni ti tang zoba jap kyore. Shilo ko devi cheto ta mangchuk jap kyore nga tsu. Oya dev jento teni kanza rang nani nga tsu ashu ndaman na zoba yong kyore. Dev jento tsokpa tang tsokpa ka war, chuluk tang chuluk ko war, mirik tang mirik ka war, gyarkap tang gyarkap ka war, zoba shilok jap ka na wa nga tsu cha tsang. Niri shini nga tsu teni she kyore.
And then we fight over these things, all the acquiring of and so forth of these external objects and circumstances. And we can see that that fight can be so fierce that it leads to wars between countries. It leads to intense disharmony between individuals. And so all of our sort of dispute and so forth is around these external objects of our perception between different organizations, between different religions, between different ethnicities, between different countries. Then we have all kinds of dispute over these things.
Tere, teni ta kare re zena shilugni ngi kare zekyo zena shilugni dewa thobyate bayarwi dewa zekyo re ngi ti mante te takyo gemsen kare re zena shilugni nga cho dewa chongchan thobna te shurur ke kenwang ke goni ti thobre yena ken jambate ken jambachi ke wang ki yang nyam go khyo re ti shirna nga cho teni dewa zete mambo mathobni nyogda tang kangar tang dungar zate maro yongdo khyo 디 김천 코랑 가르제나 무부 니룩라 김천 요로바 김천 가립시니 쉐롤라 때니 대와 도크요 말 동어만 보토도 제나 가레지나 쉐롤 코랑 때라 때니 데비 명니 고마데 마레스 어디 김천 길에스 코초 때니 어디 착해요레 데레스
So then what? When we look at the sort of amount of happiness, of pleasure, well-being we derive from the external objects of our perception, and we look at that happiness that we get in dependence upon these external circumstances. This happiness, Rinpoche said, I call it borrowed happiness, because it's completely dependent upon or borrowed from those conditions, those circumstances. And in actuality, when we look at how much happiness, the measure of well-being or pleasure or happiness that we get from those external objects, then it's very small. And so then when we look at the external conditions, they only give us a very small amount of happiness, and in fact all of our other problems come from them as well, and so they give us great trouble. So they give us a small degree of happiness and lots of problems. Why is that the case? What's the reason for this? The reason is because those external objects then they aren't a source of big happiness. They're only a source of small happiness, and they are a source of great problems, great suffering. And so they're not actually a true source of happiness in the first place, which is why we struggle so much in our pursuit of happiness, reliant upon external conditions. That's why. There is a way to rely on them, but we don't know how, and so in relation to them, instead, we have more problems. And so one of the reasons is, as human beings, we have endless desires. So there is a way that we rely on them in which they can benefit us. So I'm not saying don't rely on them. We need to eat food. We need to have a bed to sleep on. We need to have, shelter and transportation. They have serve a purpose. The problem, though, is that our desire goes far beyond that and is just endlessly wanting. So we have a saying, they say, desirable objects are like salty water. The more that we partake of them, the more our craving grows. That's the way things are. And in our experience is proof of this. And logic proves this as well. But we don't follow logic. What we follow is what we feel. Our mind feels or wants. And then we follow those feelings. So that's the problem.
Ngubu nilugla yurla chizam tena dewa ndacham top kare sami chachik yore nga chu taka ko yo mar. Chat khama kore. Chat libgarwa nga chu yurla nyuksong ti jemsan kilo pa yong yore ze te landi. Landis. Yeah.
So the external objects have already given us the answer. They have already given us what they can give us, which is why, despite the fact that we can see how busy, how many actions sentient beings across the earth are taking in order to get happiness dependent upon these external objects. So many actions, so many disputes, so many troubles and fights that we create over those things. And yet, despite all of our efforts and our enormous struggle, we are not getting the happiness which we seek. That is because the reason for this is because that is the nature of external objects. They don't have anything more to give us than we're already getting. It isn't that we haven't sought them. It's not that we're not trying to get happiness enough. It's also not that the objects are holding back and not giving us the happiness that they have to give. Do you know what that means?
Yeah. You know, it's
not that the objects are withholding happiness. It's not that we aren't seeking happiness in the objects. We've done everything. We've tried everything. Already. And it's because what we've gotten is all that there is to get from those things. That's it. So there's nothing else. You're not going to get more. So then there's only one place left where we can find happiness. If all the external objects are not the source of that, then there's one remaining place, which is our mind. And primarily true happiness comes from the mind.
When Mukchilan Zambu Mukchilanga to Goya Chasan the Topson and Zambu Langla Yopi Punsum Sopi Gare Gokona Chatang Topsona Angatola. Yan Timatela Semkipuyo in Yomar. The Pachanga to Green Tish Tokyo. The Gemsante Teni Yurko Thinking Tang Chatang Zumba Zamki. Same could they get Dukio Mares. Same could they were same could Zogukiores. Same could Dungar Tankang at the same could sell Gukiores. Natu Semnang, Tungubu Chunites, Tungubu Nilukres. Oh, Tendis.
For example, if you have a person who's given everything that they could desire in the material universe. They could have everything. They have all of it. They've acquired everything that they could possibly have in the material universe. Would we then say now they're completely happy and just joyful? I pretty much can guarantee that's not what will happen. And this is because the external objects then do not have within themselves sufficient conditions to give our mind happiness, to give us peace and well-being. The only one that can give our mind peace and well-being or happiness is the mind. The mind creates its own happiness, and the only one that can dispel mental suffering is mind can dispel its own suffering, its own hardships, and so forth. This is the operating system of the universe. This is its natural state. It's how it works, or its nature.
Sem koranganani sem kuzuwi devate lil hawo nyamya yo mare. Lil hawo ken jankim chok thok yo mare. Nga chu sem dul za chig yore. Nga chu sem to mandirwi sem pe sem gopore. Gopo zena kar zekhore zena ne nga chu sem nangla gare yore zena ne ta tsawate nga chu dagzan chembo dagchinzin chembo. Delap tenni ne khongtho mapo. Dochek mapo. Chaktok mapo. Ngarger mapo. Oh, Devjin yang di nyumo ba tetagla teni jigna mapo, semter mapo. Ta tansang nga chu namtok maro ro ni matam chek semna la dea me pachak do udwa. 대소 간이 평교리 제나랑 그 삼로 땅땅 독립 평교리 나초 삼로 땅땅 셈자디 할리비 누르톱 쳔보레 차창미나니 톱 체후테 셈레 대답 잘나양 셈도 톱 체크요레 둥거 쇼나양 셈도 톱 체크요레 직단 감그 누르톱 체후테 셈레 어떤 일이세요?
The well-being or happiness that is mentally created, that mind creates from within itself, is not a well-being that can easily be destroyed by external conditions. Other conditions cannot easily steal that mental well-being. And we lack that mental well-being because our minds are untamed, because our minds are wild. Which is to say that we haven't worked on our minds. We haven't developed our minds. We've developed and worked on everything else outside of ourselves. We've learned how to, farm and, we know what seeds to plant and then water and then nutrients and then we know how to build buildings and we know how to make jewelry and you name it, clothes and different kinds of clothes and how to adorn ourselves with all of these things. And so we're very learned in developing the outer objects, but we've left our mind with zero development. We've basically left it out of the picture, like let it just be whatever it is, wild, without developing or working on it at all. And so then we have this very wild, untamed mind. And at its center is this intense over-fixation on self, a grasping to and cherishing of self, self-centered fixation, which then leads to intense selfishness, which then leads to all of our anger and desire and jealousy and envy and all of our other disturbing emotions, which then all of those disturbed thoughts and so forth lead to having fear and anxiety and all the other mental states these days in particular, where we have so many concepts that they constantly disturb our mind and it has no chance to have mental well-being. And the reason why, as a society, as human beings on earth as a whole, we lack that mental well-being is because of our mind's way of thinking. Our own mind, its own way of thinking, is why we're so troubled. And the most powerful condition determining our experience is our mind. It is extremely powerful. It is the most powerful tool we have that affects our experience. And so when it comes to finding happiness, our mind is the most powerful thing for doing so. And when it comes to eliminating suffering, our mind is the most powerful thing in doing so. Our mind is the most powerful tool in the universe, the mind which we have. 맞죠?
대리. 대니 소 나추 대화치 문이 톱 삼나 셈 급소 덮게 오리. 둥알리 문이 타러 시고 삼나 셈 그 덮게 오리. 김선 칸에 저는 이 캐나 돌아라봐. 김선 가리레 제나 가립신이 유르니 톱음에 셈나 리칼리나 톱게 오르선 저와 요 초코라 왔잖아. You know, I don't understand this, you guys here, the London, the people here, this country's people's mind, but I know very well America people's mind. So they definitely have these kind of questions. So I'm going to answer you that. 가리지나 나도 샘 코랑 그 지르텐데 가리지나 샘 코랑 그 지테 샘 코랑 그 니룩데 대와리. 오케이, 집데리. 쫀 예니 메리. the same korang quality nil kre when na nga chu chi chi na chi korang nyoma zo khyo na chi ni lu tang pore chi korang ka shi la nyoma ngoma de song yo mar korang tang pore ngoni shala we te nang jin nga chu sem de la yang sem korang ka ram jin te sem korang ka ni lu te dungar men kan de yontan mapo sabung ku chur kim jong yong kan ka sam kim ke pe yontan mapo jong Tip na kyon ki cha tham chi sem ki nil mare when nan dam bak nam jin dam nam jin de chinang holor ku shong ro koram da rong re ma to mi chi ram jin mare de nam jin nga chu yang kyon tham chi tan da rong re sem korang jib de ta ona kare gu kre zana nga chu jib de rong ka sem ka tang bo ni ni fundamentally korang jib de yimba de yimba tar to ngun de kir ku yo to ya yung gu yo re ta yin na yung mup chu wa kar re ze na ta dang yu ma ta pi kong de sem kun ndam da wo nyu ma te so ko drip ni sem ku yon de ngun de kir chu yo ma nga so ta kare go re ze na dan di nyu ma te so sem ku tang ge chung gu cha tham che te ndur she pa ze na te fang mar she pa te lang tor she gu ko re lang sha tang tor sha yo re sem korang nang sem ku yun deng ge cha te lang sha re sem ku chung ge cha holor wa tham che te tor sha re ten di res
So if we truly want to experience mental well-being or happiness, then that is created by our own mind. Mind creates its own well-being, and it can create that. Likewise, if we truly want to be free from suffering, from affliction and so forth, the mind can be free. The mind can free itself. And so probably many of you already have this question, why? How come if the external objects can't give us happiness and freedom from suffering, that the internal perceiver, the mind, can give us that? So that was where Rinpoche said, I don't know, here in London if this question is coming up for you, but I know in America it definitely would be. And so then the reason why is because the fundamental basis of the mind itself, the ground of mind, or we could say mind's natural state, is a state of well-being, is peaceful. The mind is not fundamentally flawed, is not fundamentally negative. If the mind's source, if its very nature were suffering, then there would be no hope. There is no freedom from suffering because it's already our nature.
Then I can say like, I'm so sorry, nothing to do.
But the nature of our mind is not flawed. Our mind's natural state is imbued with all potential positive qualities, is a state of peace itself. And so the analogy we can give is like water. Water that has dirt in it, so it's muddy and kind of unclear. The nature of water is clear, but due to the temporary condition of dirt, we can't see the clarity of the water.
Filters,
for example, but we know that water is naturally clear, so we made filters. And then it comes out and now it's clear. Because that's its fundamental nature. And so we can filter out the temporary sort of obscuring factors like mud or dirt. So similarly, our mind's own nature, our mind's natural state is without suffering, is complete or replete with all positive qualities. And so we could say they're like dormant seeds, like seed potentials that reside within ourselves. All of the positive qualities of mind are present innately. And the potential to experience them is always there because they reside
연탄
within our
탐색
mind's
떡버렸던
natural
차트
state.
없이 거래
So we could
스파클링
say that
거래
all the positive qualities are there just like kind of sparkling within our mind, ready to be opened, ready
사금
to
사크요래
be
다
for
옛날
us to
아주
awaken to
사주크요
them.
말하는 소리
But then we stop ourselves from awakening to those. We stop ourselves from developing and cultivating those because we become confused by the flaws and the obscurations, like the mud in the water. But again, it is temporary. And so all of the flaws that we experience within our mind are such that we can be freed from them. Our mind can be separate from them because they're merely temporary conditions and not our mind's natural state. And so that is why when mind seeks happiness within itself, it can find that peace and well-being, and it can find and create that freedom from suffering because that is already its natural state. That is already what it is. What prevents us from doing so, from experiencing our mind's natural state, is the temporary conditions, like the mud in water prevents us from experiencing water's natural clarity. Then all of the flaws, the afflictions and thoughts and so forth, all the obscurations that we have, all of those, we can be freed from them. We can be separated from them because they're conditional. They're not permanent and they're circumstantial. And so our mind always has the possibility, or we could say the potential for freedom from all the affliction and the mental unhappiness and suffering that we experience. Those factors can be eliminated, while at the same time, its innate positive potentials can always be cultivated. And so what we want to eliminate or free ourselves from are the temporary conditional flaws that our mind experiences, and what we want to adopt or to cultivate, to develop within ourselves is all of the innate positive qualities that we already possess.
오나 다 데스타고 쫀트 파르시 파탄 둥어 트러버시 파탄 데가 토퍼시 피 가리고 그래서나 다 가리고 오나 샘상만 간시님 조거를 하오 가리시님 조거도 제나 데트와라와 더 가리리 제나네 데라네 나추 탑람 고kh요레 탑람 때 나추 가리요레 제나 쪼우 탑람 시르탄 마보 요 초거레 되나 마보 요레스 시르탄 샘더르 셰피 탑람 quena meditation 나 쪽바 요레 대비신도 때니 지금 샘더르 셰피 탑람 나 쪽바 요레 옛나양 독독 시비잖아 니 그냥 더 그래 쪼우 짜와 니리 짜와 니 더 가리리 제나네 되니 나추 ngubu niluk tokpi zena fangxia tang langxia tamchet gande yin ha kom kan ke tokpi hirap ti mangla ngubu niluk tokpa se temdir control ha kom kan nguni gande she kan nguni dewa sem tadangi lapswa sem durgona gande shini durgo kan gare she go kan dok tani nguni ha kom kan ke jam kan ke hirap yore langxia kangin fangxia kangin ha kom kan tang number yewam jen kan ke hirpi ti mangla chama me bi hirp zena da gebi hirp zena yanda chok tu kyur bi hirp zena yanda o te yore shirtang ka nga chunjik ten glula hiram da manda yore hwena teni chik semchen ma po no pa she ya ke cheto bam ma po zo anang bjen tang tukji ma po zo anang bjen tang semshin ma po no pa she pi thala ma po yo pa thamchet nga chu wisdom da o re ta yena tip tela tene wisdom yang tak pa te mar is gare jena khor gewi wisdom mare trama me pi wisdom mare oya tip shen nga chu chok tu kyu pi hirap je ate chik te go khyo res gare jena ngubu niluk tu kari imbat hakoni. Teni tela blantor she gukhore. Teyang niluk yopar gimsen yopi hirap gukre. Terchikres. Ti ropa tela o teres. Yeah. Sometimes I talk too much.
So then, if we look at working with our mind in this way, and we place a value on that, then how is it, then what do we need to eliminate all of the flaws, the causes of our suffering and unhappiness? How do we go about doing that? And so then we need authentic methods. We can call that skillful methods. Methods that actually work for changing our mind, for eliminating flaws and cultivating positive qualities. For example, like if you work with external things, you have to understand how they interrelate and how things operate. You know, like causes and conditions, you have to understand how they work. What's the operating system of a computer? What's the operating system of a house? And so forth. So to work on the outer objects, we have to understand their operating system, their cause and effect and interrelationship. So we have to have accurate knowledge to have accurate effects when we're working. Same with medicine, same with technology. You have to know what causes produce what effects, and then you have to work correctly in that model to get the result that you're looking for. So it's the same with our mind. So there are authentic methods, meaning then for working with our mind that actually eliminate the flaws and cultivate the positive qualities. And so then there are many methods that do authentically work with the operating system of our mind and how it works that will gradually decrease the negative factors and our suffering and unhappiness and increase the positive qualities and well-being and so forth. And so there are numberless different varieties of meditations and different authentic approaches for working with our mind that will do this, that work within the operating system, that are valid. But if we were to sum them up, then we could summarize all those authentic methods can be summed up into two qualities. And so then what are these? The first of these is wisdom that realizes the operating system of the universe, we could say the natural state, then that realizes what it is that we want to cultivate that will produce a desired effects and what it is that we want to eliminate that produce undesired effects. And so we need that wisdom that realizes the nature of the way things are and how they operate. And so then essentially, ultimately, the operating system of our mind and what causes and conditions produce what and how to work with that so that then we can cultivate those qualities that will be a source of well-being and happiness within ourselves while eliminating those that will be a source of suffering and flaws and so forth. And so then we need that accurate wisdom that knows then and understands our mind and what it is that we cultivate and what it is that we eliminate. And that discerning wisdom could be called profound wisdom or supreme wisdom or positive wisdom. Wisdom can also be translated as knowledge, depending on the context, but it's the same term. Can be both positive and negative. So there's all kinds of knowledge that we've developed about the world, and some of that knowledge is ultimately harmful to ourselves and others. For example, we've figured out how to create bombs that can kill many people. We have figured out all kinds of weapons that cause so much harm and devastation. We've figured out how to use poisonous substances on the earth. And so we have used our wisdom, our knowledge, and we have tons of knowledge about the outer world and ways in which we use it that's ultimately harmful to ourselves and others. And some of it, which is beneficial, but very little knowledge about how to tame the disturbing emotions of our mind. How do we tame and refine away and find freedom from our anger and our desire and all of our other mental afflictions? So we've developed wisdom about the operating system of the outer world, some of which is beneficial, much of which is harmful, but we've developed very little knowledge or wisdom about how our mind operates and how we can decrease our disturbing emotions and increase our positive thoughts and qualities. And so then the wisdom that I'm speaking about here that is indispensable in our pursuit of happiness then is the wisdom that understands the operating system of our mind and how we find happiness there, what it is that we want to cultivate and what it is that we want to eliminate and the methods for doing that. And so that's the first quality that we need in this process, is to seek out and cultivate that wisdom. So that's one of the two.
하장가 첨보치게 nga rang ka semnang ka dewa jibde topar she pateng sambab zang tsawa go khore hirap to go khore ndni ka tela nu pa hali pa 첨보치기 ore sem ndror she pa tang deni yon deng mun te kyor she pate ni ndak ni ka te tsawa thore dendi yes.
The second quality that is indispensable that sort of summarizes all of the authentic methods is what we call a kind heart. And this is something that we cannot do without, that ultimately must always accompany the wisdom. That is very important when we're looking at then finding peace and happiness within our own mind, creating that within our mind. We need to have a kind heart supported by wisdom, and wisdom supported by a kind heart. And then it's the most powerful or effective in terms of taming, refining away and eliminating our flaws and actualizing, making evident and realizing our innate positive qualities and potentials.
데레더니 다 원합 삼밥 상모제한테 가르래제나 삼밥 상모제한테 코랑 아주 측니 그나도 누나는 가르래제나 아주 샴바당 냥제제한테 데레 다 대응 캐나초 인치 그 강라요 비츠 그 돈당 디진라그 말에 니가 라그 말에 샴바제한테 가르래제나 당 아주 샘칠라 가고 그요래 제와 디톡니 샘체남 대화당 단독급로 콘솔 대화당 단소나 쌈야급로 랑랑 소손도가 랑라 보고지기오나 랑라 파피지기오나 대초더니 아주 딱버더랑 그 탁예후당 대초 독라 콘솔 대화 단독급로 직도가 어디 대화 단독급로 디말라 샴바세 기오리 샴세 언더 파더니 자체를 당니 아주 콤페르당니 가사가라 tani shamba ten rogo kuyore the same ko toni lob jong she gore yang ni yang to jong gore tani nyar je ze te kar ze na ne semche nam ta mata mama me semche si na ya na hwena semche ni ko tola nyar je khar tab kyo na sam ko tola khar tab kyo na jan ki dungar chor kyo pa ze chipula ze yo mar nyar je ze jan ki nyar je ze ti jan la dungartang trandu kublote o teyo gore semnala di mangla nyangje sekyore tan di semde yonna khwer chak jagna nga cho ngi khwe chik jagna dangsang zambu lang ka semta matam chik semnang e di nyamlen tang deep training de yonna di mangchu gog mare dangsang ga mangchu tang dangsang ka issue ma boyo pa chachang jedo gore tni nu pa chen boyore when I need Kenan to la Hueviga, Kenan to some lob dana, dancing among to Gap Kayong Kanka, Da Jinzen in Nayanda, Goa in Nanda, Mahun in Nanda, Sanin, Chatang Gil and Dipshamba Tanaji Gilla Kesona, weapon Chatang, then you get it. There's an a go no way. Soncha Tatang Tangla you get it. Ni kare ze kore na shamba ta nyang je ze ti nurtop tindi chembo yore kyang tu samlo ta na rendo wa nga tu samlo ta na ko go wa ngoni khon tu sem na la tindi yak po ke so na jan la no pa she kamare o tindi res
So then how do we define a kind heart? We have two terms, loving kindness and compassion. And although we use the words, at least in English, it's translated as love and compassion, the concept is defined slightly different according to this tradition. So love is where we care about, we like and care about all other living beings. And what happens when we care about them, then on top of that, we want them to have happiness. And so it's not just caring or liking others, but on top of that, very specifically wanting them to experience happiness. And in general, we have that. If we talk about wanting all living beings to have happiness, liking means liking all beings. Like we care about every living being. That sounds a little bit challenging.
Difficult, yeah. That's why we need training.
That's the reason for training, of course. But if we look at what is the opposite of love, hating, disliking. We don't need training in that. We already naturally have plenty of it. We don't like this about society, we don't like this about culture, we don't like this person, we don't like those people, we don't like this, we don't like that. We basically hate on everything these days. And think about how when you don't like something, how much unhappiness do you have? How much do you suffer over it? So every time you dislike, you have an unpleasant sensation of mind. You have unhappiness. That dislike is a way of thinking. It starts with a way of thinking. It begins there. As much as we build a habit to dislike is how much we will suffer over things. So, like if you have one thing, one reason that you dislike, that if you focus solely on that, you can suffer over that for your whole life. Just one thing, only. Now look at what is your mind, what reality or what experience is your mind creating for you. So if just the disliking of one single thing can give us that much suffering, that much unhappiness, then conversely, if we like and we care about how much happiness or joy can that bring us. It's the same. If we use logic and we understand how one produces one, we can see how the other produces another. And as much as we create a different kind of habit and different way of thinking, then we have a different way of experiencing, and that is up to us. That power belongs to us. We can think, I'm not going to constantly be disturbed about things, to be intolerant, to be overly sensitive, where even the tiniest condition then causes our mind to be harmed, to be upset, to be disturbed. We make our minds very vulnerable and weak when we're intolerant and sensitive in those ways. And each day, it gets worse and worse and worse as we continue to reinforce that habit. So rather than that, to think, okay, we're beginning 2024, I'm going to have tolerance. I'm going to have greater capacity to not be disturbed. We're starting a new year, and so then we can also think in my mind, I'm going to create a new habit. I'm going to change my way of thinking, and that will change your experience. And so in this way, just one moment. So when we look at then those that we care about and that we want happiness, we have kind of a limited scope. It's like those who are our friends and family, or our children, or our new puppy. Then with those that we feel close to, then we care about them, and therefore we want them to have happiness. And so then it can be very good. We immediately want them to have happiness. Naturally, we just want them to be happy, to have well-being, and so forth. And so then that loving kindness is what we want to develop, which means to expand it to more than just our close circle, to expand it out toward other beings, toward all beings. And so that's what it means to develop loving kindness. It's a quality that we cultivate. And as much as we cultivate that and build a habit for that, is as much kind of greater well-being and mental happiness we're going to experience in life. So basically, to the degree that we have that is to the degree that we'll experience the joy of that. And that's why we do mind training. That's why we work with our mind. We actively cultivate then these qualities using different methods and contemplations and so forth to develop that loving kindness towards a greater and greater scope of beings, which then has a great impact on our mental well-being and our experience. And then on the other hand, then we have the quality of compassion. And this is where then we acknowledge or are aware of the suffering of other living beings, whoever they are, whether they're human beings or they're other kinds of beings, animals and so forth. And we see like how much mental suffering, how much physical suffering, the difficulties that beings have. But not just where we're aware of the suffering of others, not just left at the level of, say, empathy, but very much more so than compassion is where with that then we specifically have the wish, the thought, I want them to be free from suffering. The wish that others be free from suffering. And so we make aspirations and we set that intention and so forth. And so that we're training our mind, we're cultivating compassion, and that tames our mind and it cultivates and changes our experience. And that's something that each and every one of us can do, that we all have the potential for. And so loving kindness and compassion are a practice. They're something that we cultivate. It's the inner development that we focus on as we're developing our mind in pursuit of happiness. And that is something that often we underappreciate the true power of these qualities. Because if we think about it, like for example, right now on earth, any of the wars that are taking place, if the leader of that country or the group of people or the leader of the army and so forth, if at any given point that person tomorrow were to suddenly equally want every single living being, all humans and others, to have happiness and not suffer, they would drop all of their weapons on the ground. What? Konso mi tamche dewa dang dungal chikuna, then konso chunsha tamche jagare. Nope, I missed one of the key points here. So if in their mind, then tomorrow, that's what I said.
No, you didn't.
Uh-oh. If in their mind they had love and compassion, tomorrow for everyone, for others, Mila.
Yes.
For if in their mind, that leader of that country or army and so forth, then in their mind had this loving kindness and compassion, they would drop all their weapons on the ground. Did I say something different?
No, yes, different.
It's okay.
Yes, totally different.
Yes, Rinpoche. So, but just by that example, that is the power of loving kindness and compassion. It is that powerful. It has that strength. If we were to use just that one example, then we can begin to truly appreciate the power of loving kindness and compassion. And similarly, in less dramatic examples, if we look at between two individuals, if they were to generate that love and compassion towards each other, or within a family and so forth, any issues, an internal sort of quarrel and so forth would also be pacified.
대 공그 히럽 개비 ramjin chen 대당 디 삼밥상호 대양 실록 직니 단다 ngacho ng만이 짜와 메빠치 사르트 조고요 말다 닝만이 라비 ngacho 히럽 그 사분 요래 ngacho 셈 그시라 요래 ngacho 샴바당 녀지 누바 요래 ngacho 조파 그 누바 요래 디 사분 요래 다 ngacho 가립식 고래세나 또 사퍼시위 탑식 고래 그래 또 사퍼시 발라 히럽 사퍼시 발라 히럽 줄라 겨르시피 용양 딱밥 장고 야 용장고 요래 샴당 녀 삼밥 정오 겨르시 파카레 고래세나 야 삿 용어르시 파텔라 카레 고래세나 샴당 냥제크 롭종식 고요래 뜻이나 용고요래 당하초 차상 대화 용고요래 뜻이나 랑라 요빠치 삿고래 생이 뜻이요 대니 nga초 당상 그 두쳤더라 nga초 문이 픽치크치라 자보조야 딱 치크치라 머가시니 탁랑로 당위 두쳤 말해 nga초 못함침 냠도 니고요래 nga초 초바 그 nga초 무게비니까 니경 아미 kokpani kevinika kerang chikpo kema songa 아미 kokpani kevinika nikyang kyo ama tang pala tang tani kerang machang tang chachang nyam tiyo pachi keri nga zo jitsuk chikana keri choba chikana yore ta nga zo nyam nipshini chachangmi katok karmari mirik katok ko kyapari yo mare chulu ko kyapari yo mare 대니 미륵 가래 인경자 탐칫 머와 먹직게 딥셔나 가서 차참 냠도 대니 딥 삼밥상 오고 고니 찍찍라 록밥시니 탁 니로 줘야 마토고마 찍찍라 탁랑으로 당 두초대체 다 정문이 가서 탁랑으로 로그도 딥셔나 가서 니버때 걔랑서 대랑데라 다음업집증 앞지지기 요사리 대니 걔랑서 나랑서 옛날 샘나란데 용탑 고기요래. 이런 나초 먹직 그 셈만데와나 큐뭐 직담레나 니담레나 섬담레나 랑그 머창나이나 쪽부나이나 콘솔라티 훅겐데 콘소 탭로 그래 가래 콘수 초르게래 캐랑 큐 삼로 땅땅 큐 리칼리땅 감이나 초르게로 데리레스 야 Oh, lips. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's tough.
And so then the cultivation of our positive qualities and elimination of our flaws can be summed up in all the authentic methods in entirety in wisdom and a kind heart. And that's something that we don't have to create something new that's external to ourselves to get to this. Because we don't need to invent something new. That's the word I was looking for. We don't need a new invention to get this. And the reason why is because that it's not something that doesn't already exist. The wisdom is already the potential of our mind. It resides as the fundamental potential of our mind. And loving compassion, loving kindness and compassion also are the innate potentials of our mind. And so the potential for that, the seed cause for that already exists within ourselves. So we don't have to invent it. We simply need to engage in methods that awaken those qualities within us. And so to awaken wisdom, then we need to learn those authentic methods that understand the operating system of our mind and how to work with it, to study authentic texts that teach us that knowledge. And then to awaken our loving kindness and compassion, we need to engage in mind training, to engage in the methods that develop and expand those. And so we already have what we need. Those resources are already within our mind, the potential of our mind. And so it's a matter of engaging in the methods to awaken to them and to cultivate and to foster and grow those within ourselves. And so then, in particular, Rinpoche said to really sort of bring that forward in our present day and age. This is a time where we want to sort of cherish and value those qualities and the cultivation of them, and not a time where we hold to grudges and dislikes with each other and hold to one another as being enemy and so forth. This is a time in which we need to cultivate the sense of coming together and of working together, whether it's between large groups of people or between two individuals, then that we learn how to work together and to support that working together. We didn't come into this world alone. Pardon me. We came into this world with our parents, through our mother and our father, and we were raised in this world with our family, with a group of people, and now we need to continue to work together without biases between amongst one another due to our skin color, our culture, our ethnicity, or our religion. We cannot we cannot sort of coexist. We cannot live without coexisting with one another. We're sort of reliant upon one another. And so especially now in bringing this value system into our modern times, we want to think of this as being a time where we need to create connection and create closeness, not create disconnection, not create greater distance and biases based on our differences, but to find then a commonality and cultivate connection through our similarities. And as a human beings, all of us together, then our same potentials as a human race. And so then in particular, if we have this value system of these qualities and the cultivation of them, and then we connect to others in these ways, then we are not only bringing change about within ourselves, but also those that we relate to and that we connect to, and we bring change to one person, and then they bring to another, and that expands out and grows. And so we begin within ourselves and cultivate that so that it can expand to others. And so that's about all I can say for this evening. Rinpoche said the clock is running against us. So, probably many of you know, but this weekend I'll be speaking at Rupa London and giving a talk on meditation. And so that's something that if you want are interested in, that's available. Yeah, and so I'm giving meditation instructions, methods for working with our mind with meditation. And so everyone is welcome. So I'm going to give some authentic methods for awakening the qualities that already exist within ourselves that we already have. And so then you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Wonderful.
Yes, just to underline that, the talk is on Saturday and Sunday, the 13th and 14th of January. And it's at Rigpa, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, and there's still places for people to come.
Yes.
And the charge is very small, actually, 2 days of teaching. So please avail yourselves of that. It's practice really that matters. The other thing is that there are a few books still downstairs, Power of Mind. So those of you who'd like to, have something to take away tonight, who can't go, and something to read, and digest and take, little bit by bit, and get through it, they're downstairs. And there is tea downstairs, and I'm sure you might even sign one of the books.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I can do.
Yeah, Rinpoche can sign any books. Also, on that note, if there's also some book notes, what do you call it? Bookmarks. Then if you're interested, if there aren't books to buy, and it has a QR code and information about Rinpoche in the book, if you'd like to pick one up, there downstairs as well.
Yeah, but I'd like to thank you for a very clear exposition,
Thank you.
of the state of our affairs. It's wonderful to hear such clarity,
Thank you.
and quite a beautiful thing. And can I thank you, Paloma, too, for your dynamic translation.
Yeah, she's okay.
Time for a few questions.
Chiwa Chilan Shana Diggy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Anyone like to ask a question from the audience?
Okay.
So my question is that we've talked a lot about the mind and all the negative thoughts which keep coming all the time. So what is your top tip about how to start changing that, start changing the mind so that the negative thoughts which keep recurring, the same strong thoughts, how can we get rid of them and just start focusing on positive?
Do chik chena say do. Nganzu ta kemi gawa ma che get to cook up chik topsong. Mo nganzu kande chik sem gi mi ge we ge nam tong tam chit tap chit chung chik nganzu daily they che chung drone then nganzu rangi and then chemang do ge be tap chit chung dok tapo chik yena ka war go subna de ge.
Shirtang chikte teningi konto shatpi di shirtang di hirap tang sambab zangwani ka de compare tang na korarang ko chongro do yore tab shirtang re chigres yenna ngi konto kerang chola yuba namjin hwenna nga chu teni chik dok chik rawo yenna ne hwenna nga chu di nyumon pa hachang ma po chik chongro do wati tsawak chikte nga chu margawi ndukhi komiate jakko khiores ti dokshok te ngi kontu juin teni hwena nyamare revchen to nga chu ngi kengan ta kare rang thola yona ngi kharthap khandoks oya ti zot pa chi pate jemsang kare re na chu chitsam margawapshi na te chamki nyumo pa chero tang kangar tang dungar tang nyogramaro dog yores.
So obviously in general, the process of increasing positive thoughts and emotions and decreasing negative thoughts and emotions will naturally happen as much as we engage in methods for cultivating wisdom and love and compassion, a kind heart. But if I were to give that, the more that we cultivate those, just naturally, the less negative thoughts and emotions and unhappiness and greater well-being will just gradually develop. But if I give one piece of advice this evening, just a very kind of short word, is something that I kind of touched upon earlier, which is that if we want to reduce a great degree of our mental afflictions and our negative thoughts in a very simple way, then the kind of root of all of those is our dislike for things and the habit we have to see things as unfavorable and disliking it and negative view of that. And so the way that we can begin to shift that is each day, like when we wake, we can think no matter what conditions, no matter how much adversity I face, I will not be disturbed by them. To cultivate a mind of tolerance, like I will not be disturbed, like that courageous intention, I will not dislike it. And the reason why is because the more that I dislike, the more disturbing emotions and more issues and problems I will have with things. And so we set the intention not to dislike or to reinforce that habit to think I will not be disturbed, I will be okay. So that's one very simple method that can have a big impact on your mind if you do it. Because, like, there's so many things that then we dislike that are just very kind of inconsequential all day that can be easily dealt with just by setting that intention. Even for example, we might have just a small physical injury or a very kind of inconsequential sickness, but then we focus on it and we think, I hate this, I dislike this, and then as much as we focus on it is how much we blow up our suffering over the thing. And so but then you may have a person who has a fairly serious ailment or injury, but in their mind, they're like, I'm okay. They have I'm going to be tolerant, I'll be okay, I can have okayness with this. And they really set this intention and really set that habit, and they don't get disturbed about it. Then the amount that they suffer over that sensation, even the actual physical sensation of pain, can greatly be reduced by their mental okayness with it. Because as I said, so when we talk about suffering or happiness, then it has to do with our mind's way of thinking. And our mind's way of thinking is about the habits that we reinforce. And so what are we reinforcing in our daily habits? So if we think, for example, of like different kinds of foods in the world.
Oh yeah, like for example, in Tibet, we usually eat, we call the zamba.
Roasted barley flour.
For me, it's wow. For the zamba is very, very good. Okay, 3 meals a day, no problem me. Okay, evening zamba, lunch zamba, dinner zamba, no problem me. Definitely you Western people thinking I'm tired, this zamba, again zamba and again zamba, you know, because that's how you thinking, that's why. I have already, you know, that habit, I love it. So so
the thing is, do we like it or dislike it? Do we see it as favorable or as unfavorable? And that has, the majority has to do with the habit of our mind. And so starting to shift, be aware of that, and shifting those habits of like and dislike. So for example, if we don't like the way someone speaks, or we don't like the way someone looks at us.
I know everybody work very hard these days. If you don't like your boss, you know, I know people don't like sometimes. I heard that, but I didn't have any boss, but because I didn't work. So I don't know that experience, but I heard many times. And then the people don't like their boss. But, you know,
So, you know, whatever it is that irritates or makes them dislike that person, then the way they look or speak. If every day you focus on how you don't like this about them, then you're like how you dislike your boss, then eventually you'll quit your job. You won't be able to handle them anymore. Because we focused on and built a habit for our dislike of them. So when we go to work, when we're interacting with others, do you really develop a high tolerance of not being easily disturbed, of, you know, a high range of tolerance, to not be thin-skinned. And so the more tolerance, the less upset we have about things and so forth, the more okay we are with different kinds of people and circumstances, and we'll find that we can be okay with our coworkers and our boss and so forth, because our unokayness is, and our okayness has to do with our way of thinking. So for the majority, of course, there are certain circumstances where people, you know, have bad intentions or really, you know, engaging in, you know, literally harmful actions. And I'm not saying that they have no fault or anything, but just talking about how we change our experience from our side, our perspective. Because typically we over-exaggerate, like we have a great amount that we project onto the experience that aren't actually the case. So if we have something we dislike a little bit, then our mind projects this huge thing, and we have a huge issue over some small condition, and we freak out about it. And
Really
we speak like this. I can't handle it.
Yeah.
And so then we have to acknowledge the role that our mind is playing in that circumstance as well, not just the condition that we're perceiving.
Yeah,
Lots
really
of-
is.
Okay.
Yeah, now everybody is sleepy a little bit. Their brain is already tired. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.